Hi again, welcome back to JKK Reads. I'm using today as an opportunity to talk about all the books that I have not been talking about for the past 3 years. All of these books that I'm about to talk about today are the books that made me want to start a channel. Cause like these are the books that as I'm reading them, I'm like, oh, I just wish I could talk about these. Like I need to talk about these to someone on the internet who's watching this video will have read this book and can comment, and I can comment back and we can talk about it, or I can just talk about it aimlessly and without direction to a camera for whomever's interested. But for my loyal fan base of 35 followers at the time of this video, I think I owe it to you to let you know which books I am absolutely obsessed with, what are my all-time favorite books, and what books am I using to navigate me as I am trying to define my tastes and find new books that I'll love. Like what am I looking for when I pick up a new book? All of these books I'm going to talk about today kind of push me towards that direction. And of course I still try and read new things and find new things that I love, but when I just want something familiar, I look for things like these books. So these are like all-time favorites. So I'm gonna go kind of year by year, but I'm going to start with series that I love. There are two that I want to call out because these don't really fit into a particular year. I've kind of read these like across years. So the first one I first read probably like 7 or 8, no, way more than that, probably like 10 years ago at this point. This is the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series. This series is kind of like my Hunger Games, my Twilight, my Harry Potter, my Percy Jackson. This is what I was reading when I was a teenager, particularly these three, the first three in the series. So this is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, Hollow City, and Library of Souls. They came out first. The next batch of 3 still in the series came out like years later. This is about a boy named Jacob. That's not why I love the series, but we do share a name. His grandfather dies. He was very close to his grandfather, closer to his grandfather than his parents. And he kind of goes on this journey to Europe to learn more about his childhood. His grandfather had left him like clues to an island he used to live on, where he alludes to sort of fantastical things, a fantastical home he had when he was a kid. And so Jacob goes on a journey to find it. He does find it, and we are sent on a originally 3-book journey as he gets initiated into this magical world. The series continued several years later with A Map of Days, The Conference of the Birds, and The Desolation of Devil's Acre. I still to this day have not read the last 2. I don't want to hear it. We're just going to ignore that. I very recently read, not very recently, I read it like 2.5 years ago, but I more recently than the first 3 have read A Map of Days, and I loved it just as much as the original 3. It gave me that all those feelings I had as a teenager. I got those again, and I haven't continued in the series for fear of just like it being over. So perhaps a series reread and then continuation is in my future. But this series is the first thing that I ever really read like for pleasure as a teenager. So this series really means a lot to me. And it led me to my all-time favorite book in a strange way, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But next, more recently, another series that I've come to love a lot in my adulthood is the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire. This is a series of sort of standalone novellas about a home for children who, for one reason or another, have gone through magical doors to worlds that they belong in more than they belong in this one. For one reason or another, the kids come back to this world and they have trouble transitioning and accepting that their true home is no longer available to them. So they go to Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children to cope with that loss. And each odd numbered book is at the home, and we're following a journey. And then every even-numbered book focuses in on one of the kids who end up at Eleanor's home and follows them as they find their door and the world they went to. I currently have 9 books here. The 10th one just came out like a week ago. That's Adrift in Currents Cleaning. What is it? Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear, I think. I just recently, if you watched my end of year wrap up, know I read Lost in the Moment and Found, which was the 8th book. The next one I have to read is number 9, Misladen Parts Have Known. And then the 10th one that just came out, and then I'll be caught up. But I like to delay these a little bit. I honestly don't really like being caught up with series until the next one comes out. I kind of like to be like one book behind, just so that I know the journey can continue whenever I'm ready for it. So I'm often not caught up with this series, but I did find it a couple years ago and I'm absolutely in love with it. Some of them are better than others, but in total, this is definitely a 5-star series, and the entire, even if I don't love particular books, the journey as a whole is one of my favorite things I've discovered. Okay, so now I'm gonna go year by year in my like modern reading journey and talk about books that are like all-time favorites for me. So I started what I call like my modern reading journey at the end of 2021. That's when I started choosing reading as an active hobby rather than something I did passively whenever a book caught my interest. That's when I really started like looking for things that would catch my interest and setting goals for myself to actually read more intentionally, if that makes sense. So that happened like literally like November 2021. So I just kind of wrapped that into 2022. So this group of books are like all-time favorites that I found in my first year of reading. And I'm so fortunate that I found what is still today my favorite book of all time in my first like real intentional reading year. And that is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Get into this edition. This is about a guy, Zachary. He finds a book in a library, and in that book is a story of himself when he was a child, and that sends him on a journey to an underground library beneath the surface of the earth, as all underground things are. And it's told in the most haunting way, like wrapped, like the main story is surrounded by a bunch of other seemingly separate stories that all come together to meet Zachary in his story. I just find this to be such an ode to the art of storytelling and a love letter to storytelling. I have a tattoo of my favorite line. It's right here. It says, "And no story ever truly ends as long as it is told." I just think that's so lovely. I am constantly on the hunt still to this day for books that are told like this, that feel like fairy tales, that are told in bits and pieces. And the way that I found this book, I went on an app. I think it's called Likewise. I cannot remember what it's called. Maybe I'm putting it here. I had just reread the Miss Peregrine series, and I went on this app. It's like an app where you can put in, whether it's a book, a movie, a TV show, whatever, you can put in something that you like and describe what you liked about it and ask for recommendations. And so I said that I wanted sort of this like chosen one fantasy story, but I wanted it to be queer because Jacob in this story is not queer, and I was looking for queer stories. And they recommended me The Starless Sea. I can't say that wasn't a good recommendation because I don't know when or if I ever would have read this without that, and this is like my favorite book ever, so it worked out. But like I wouldn't say that this reminds me of this, so I don't really know if it was a great recommendation in that sense, but I don't care. I'm so glad, whoever that was, thank you for recommending that, because this is my favorite. This is my Bible. This is my favorite thing ever. Also that year I found The Vanishing Half. This is about 2 twins. They are Black, but they are white passing. One of them chooses to leave home and live her life as a white woman. The other twin decides to stay home and continue living life as a Black woman, and it follows them. It's sort of this generational story, so we find them as kids and we follow them into adulthoods where they have their own children. Of course, the sister who is living her life as a white woman, her daughter doesn't know that, you know, she's biracial. She just thinks she's white because she's raised white. She thinks her mom is white. And it just shows you know, between these two, they could not be more the same person. They're twins. They're as same as any two different people could be. But it is kind of an examination of how different lives can be solely based on the race that they are, quote are, because that's, of course, the sister's black, but she's passing for white. So despite these people being like the same person, they're twins, their lives are just completely different based solely on the race that they choose to present as. This was my second favorite book from that year, definitely an all-time favorite here. The next book that I ranked that year as third is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. And actually I'm gonna bring out his other book, The Sunbearer Trials, which I had ranked 7 that year. And I don't know if I would classify this as an all-time favorite necessarily. Like, I kind of feel like my all-time favorites from that year cuts off. Like, I don't even know if I'm ranking my 6th as an all-time favorite, even though I'm going to talk about it. But I just want to talk about these together because they're both by the same author, and I just want to gush about Aiden Thomas as an author. So this book is about Yadriel. He is a trans man, he is Hispanic, and he's from a magical family where the magic system is gendered. Women in this world have different magic than men. And within the first chapter, he discovers that he actually can do the magic that men can do. And it's about him trying to be accepted in the community with that magic when everyone thinks that really he cannot do that. He should be doing the magic that is for female members of this community. And it's just such a clever way to examine gender roles in Latinx culture. He also examines the trans masc Latinx experience in the Sunbearer Trials, but he hones in on 2 completely different aspects of that experience. Like, this is very much Yadriel being a trans man is very much like an external conflict. Like, it's about how his community sees him. And this one centers more on like that being an internal conflict, and the sort of body dysmorphia is a major theme. This is about Teo. He's a trans man. This is much more high fantasy than this one. This is just like a magical community. This is a whole fantasy world. And in this world, gods are real, and they're like celebrities, and their children are celebrities. And Teo is the son of what is essentially like the goddess of birds. And so he's born with wings. But because he's assigned female at birth, he has wings that like female birds have. In nature, female birds are kind of dull in color. It's the male birds that have the really ostentatious coloring because it's like a mating thing. And so he is born with female bird wings. They're dull, they're not colorful, and he's very, very self-conscious about that. He binds his wings so they can't be seen. And so that's not the entire story, but that's a major conflict with him as a character. The whole story is about, it's like a death game. It's a competition between the children of the gods, where the loser has to be killed to stave off some evil. It's like a ritual. This is definitely for sure an all-time favorite. I preferred this one to this one, but I do love this one so much. I love Aiden Thomas so much. I just think he has such a unique way of analyzing his experience as a Latinx trans man, and he puts a lens on that experience in such unique, imaginative ways. I just think he is incredible. And this book specifically means a lot to me because after I read The Starless Sea, I had such a book hangover, and I was just certain I would never love another book again. Like, I thought this book ruined me. I was like, I should just stop reading. Like, I will never be able to love a book again. After reading this, but then I eventually came out of that and chose to read this directly after this, and this cradled me and let me know I still can. Even if I don't love books as much as this one, there are still books I can love out there. So it holds a special place in my heart for that reason. Other books I loved, I ranked this number 4 in 2022. This is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This is just so cozy. TJ Klune is just such a cozy author. He writes cozy fantasy. This is about a guy, what was his name? Wallace. He dies and he ends up sort of being in this limbo space. He goes to a tea shop that is meant to host recently departed people to get them ready to move on to the afterlife. And there's a zany cast of characters and a whole found family vibe. And I read this at a tea shop, which was such immaculate vibes, and I cried and thought this was beautiful. So this was great. This is definitely an all-time favorite. The Darkness Outside Us made my top 5 this year. This is about these two, Ambrose and Kodiak. They are astronauts on a ship. They have no memory of launching. It's clear that something happened on the ship that was probably not good, but they have no memory of it. All they know is they're flying to Saturn's moon, Titan, to rescue Ambrose's sister. But that's the last memory they have is getting selected to be on, or getting selected to be the astronauts, but they have no memory after that. And so they have to figure out why. Look at them. Clearly there's homosexuality happening here, which I love. I have the sequel sitting over there, just waiting for me to get to it. But yeah, I absolutely love this. This is definitely an all-time favorite. And then the last book I want to talk about from 2022, I have a very complicated relationship with. This is Fly Away by Kathleen Jennings. I'm talking about this as an all-time favorite because since I read this in October of 2022 and have not been able to stop thinking about it since, like I think about this all the time. The way this story is told, I think, is akin to The Starless Sea, just like that fairy tale feeling of it all. The story's told in parts, but they all add to the main story that's happening. When I first read this, I gave it a 4. And then as I was ordering or like ranking all my books from that year, like this just kept moving up until eventually I decided it was my 6th favorite book that year. And I'm like, okay, well, obviously it's not a 4 then, like it's a 5. And I can't even think about why it was a 4. Like the only memories I have of it are incredible. So I have no idea why I gave it a 4. And then when I'm thinking about like, oh, what are some of my all-time favorite books? Like this is one that I think about. So this deserves a reread because I really need to solidify my thoughts on it. I honestly, sitting here, don't even remember what it's about. I just remember the vibes. There's a dark fantasy fairy tale sort of romantically evil vibe surrounding it all. It's set in Australia. It really is like, it's just a dark fairy tale and it's just so atmospheric. And those are the memories that I have since reading it that have stuck with me. And just like the way the story is structured in these kind of like disparate parts that all come together at the end. It's just like, it's just like sort of like a collection of these dark fairy tales that all tell a story, and it's just very haunting. Okay, 2023 was a weird year for me. It is absolutely, without question, my best reading year. I have 11 books from this year sitting here that I would consider all-time favorites, but just because where I was at in life with grad school and everything, trying to finish up, I was in my final year. That didn't end up being my final year because it stretched until the summer of 2024. Not even the summer of 2024. It went from spring to summer into fall of 2024, so I extended it. But anyway, I just like didn't have the time. I didn't ever do an official ranking like on my Bookstagram or anything, which I started at the beginning of 2023. I never did any sort of post or ranking or analysis of these books in any way. So I honestly, for myself, have no idea how I would order these at all, except for my top 3. Those are pretty solidified. But when I think about everything after that, like any of those books could go in any order because I just love them all so much. And if I were to rank like my 2022 favorites and my 2023 favorites, like 7 or 8 of these that I'm about to talk about from 2023 would come before my second favorite book from 2022. So like it would be The Starless Sea as my favorite book of all time, and then like the books from 2023, most of them, and then my second favorite book from 2022. So like this was just my best reading year, but I never had a chance to talk about it. except for now. So my favorite book from that year, it was stiff competition because my second and third, I promise you, you're gonna know them and you might even feel a little scandalized that something beat them. But my favorite book from 2023 was Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. This is it's just such a beautiful, enchanting book. Again, told in a similar way to The Starless Sea and Fly Away. Like, I just really gravitate towards, like, I wouldn't say this feels like it's told in separate pieces or is fairy tale-ish, really. But this is about an apartment complex. There's 5 apartments, so a small community of people living very close to each other. And each of them are haunted in their own way. They each have a ghost associated with them. And the story jumps several times from the main story being told to the perspective of the ghosts that are haunting them, and adding information to the story from their point of view and addressing the reader to get the reader to understand things that are happening throughout the plot. I think I just really, really love when books are interrupted in some way to provide information. In this one, it's sort of a direct-to-reader, but not by just some random narrator. Like, it has the whimsy of it's these ghosts, and you know, it has that surrealism to it. There's another book I'm going to talk about that kind of does the same thing, but then in Starless Sea and Fly Away, the story is interrupted not by any like sort of narrator, but just by a new story that is meant to add information. And I just love that. This book is so incredibly beautiful. The relationships these people have are so beautiful. The relationships these people have or had with the people that are now haunting them is in some cases really beautiful, but in some cases just touching and emotional for other reasons. I never in my life thought a passage about someone waking up covered in cornmeal would make me bawl my eyes out, but this book had me crying hysterically about someone waking up covered in cornmeal. And if you've read this book, you get it. My second and third favorite books in 2023 were Babel and Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Rebecca Kuang, the woman that you are. This is about a kid named Robin. It's like the early 1800s. He is recently orphaned in Canton. He is rescued by a professor, from a professor at Oxford University, and he adopts him with the promise of teaching him everything he needs to know to be accepted into Oxford University to join their prestigious translation program. The translation aspect of this book brings a fantasy element because in this alternate history, the act of translation with the addition of silver produces a magical effect. So there's this whole economy in this history involving magical silver bars and Oxford's role in bringing in people from other countries to do these translation works for the crown, for Britain. And so it's just an examination of like imperialism in that way. And then Yellowface, completely different. This is a literary satire about an author who is sort of like frenemies with another author. The main girl, June, she is very, very unsuccessful in her career. She's a white woman. And then her friend, Athena, she's an Asian woman. She's a very, very successful author, and they're hanging out one time alone at Athena's apartment, and Athena dies. June finds a manuscript Athena was basically finished with. She steals it, publishes it as her own, and it gets wild from there. The range this woman has is incredible. Like, this is like a historical fantasy. This is literary satire. And then I cannot wait to get to the trilogy she wrote before either of these, the Poppy War trilogy, because that's like high fantasy. And so she just like has so much range. And then when this year, I think Catabasis is coming out, her next book, and that, if you are not an R.F. Kuang stan, just you might just want to block me now. Like, I'm not gonna know how to act when Calabasas comes out. That is gonna be sort of seemingly like a fantasy satire, like kind of a mix of everything she's done so far, about two grad students who have to travel into hell to save the soul of their advisor. And that is a metaphor that really resonates with me as a recently graduated grad student. Okay, and then I'm gonna talk about a bunch of other books from 2023 that I loved in no particular order. You could ask me on any day how I would rank these, and I'd give you a different answer every single day. The Monk and Robot duology is just so absolutely beautiful by Becky Chambers, A Psalm for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crown Shy. This is about Dex. They're a monk. They're a tea monk, and their whole job is to go around to different villages with tea and offer people of the community tea, and they will just listen to whoever needs to come and talk and drink tea. This is set on a world where technology had advanced really, really far, such that robots could basically do everything. But then robots gain sentience. They express that they don't want to basically be slaves anymore, and the people agree. There's a whole treaty that's signed that allows all these sentient robots to go off into the forest, live completely in isolation, in peace, away from people. And this new society that happened like maybe a century prior to where we find Dex here. And it's a complete, like, there's no technology. It's like sort of back to medieval times, but like in a really, really cozy way. Just these like small villages, simple life. And Dex decides that even though they have kind of this really cozy job, they feel like they're living more for other people than themselves. So they decide to be done with the tea monk thing and just travel solely for themselves and not for anyone else. And then they meet a robot. I can't remember the robot's name, but they meet a robot who has been tasked with going back to humanity, see how far they've progressed, collect information about if robots and people can reintegrate somehow peacefully. And that's where the story goes. I categorize this as cozy science fiction. For all this talk of cozy fantasy, people really need to get into cozy sci-fi. I hope I can find more things like this. This is the world, like, this is the only way I can explain it is just, this is the world I wish we had. I wish we lived here. And A Psalm for the Wild Built starts, like, in its acknowledgements, it says, for anybody who could use a break. And I think that sort of explains the vibe that you can expect. Just cozy, a breath of fresh air, and really, really sweet. Piranesi by Susanna Clark has to be on here. This is about a guy. He lives in this isolated labyrinth. And for most of the book, you have absolutely no idea what's going on. He spends his life traveling around the labyrinth, mapping it, figuring out what hallways lead where, what rooms are where. That's all he does with his life, is he just maps this labyrinth that he lives in. He doesn't know how he got there. He doesn't remember being born. He doesn't remember anything. All he remembers is living in this labyrinth. Every so often, another person will come asking for information about the labyrinth, which our main guy gives to him. And then we discover who he is, who this other guy is, what the labyrinth is all about. And it is really, really stunning. Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott is the book I was alluding to when I was talking about other birds, just like the main story getting interrupted by a narrator that talks to the reader and gives information about things we're learning, and how I just really, really like that structure. This is about two siblings. They inherit a house on chicken legs. In folklore, the house on chicken legs belongs to Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is a figure in like Eastern European and Jewish folklore, and she lives in a house on chicken legs, classically in her lore. So this is sort of a retelling of that story. Jewish history, Jewish folklore is laced throughout this book in the most striking way. So many heavy topics are tackled here with respect to Jewish history. in the most novel way, that these two siblings, they have powers. One can make inanimate objects come to life if they have a face, and the other one can sort of shapeshift into other people. And the way those powers become a metaphor to what Jewish people have experienced throughout history is like your mind, Jenna Rose, your absolute mind. It's just a complete shock from page 1 to page the end. How everything comes together, how the mystery of these kids and their powers relates to the lore of the house, and how the story that is told to you as the main story is interjected with like sort of direct to reader conversation. It all just comes together. It's just incredible, just the way it all comes together. So this is an all-time favorite down. Leave the World Behind by Rumen Alam, recently adapted into a Netflix movie. This is sort of a non-urgent apocalypse. I don't even know how to describe it. It's about a family. They go on vacation. They're in an Airbnb. The couple who owns the house comes back and says, we have to return here to this house. Sorry, I know you guys have paid to stay here, but there is an emergency. There are things going on in the city, and we cannot be there. And so there's like this tension between the family who rented the house, the family that owns this house, what's real, what's not. But just Rumen Alam's writing is so stunning. There's this one chapter where the mom has gone to the grocery store and she's just buying items, and it's literally listing her grocery list, and it's just her picking items off the shelf. But I can't explain what it is about the way Rumen Alam specifically writes something like she grabbed the bread off the shelf. That is just so beautiful. It's just the use of punctuation. It's the flow of her just grabbing items off the shelf, like just the flow and the tone of the writing itself. Some people, when they type a word onto a page, it has a completely different vibe than if someone else did it. And he's one of those writers. The words he puts onto a page, someone else could write the exact same words and it just wouldn't feel the same. Like, he just has a magic that comes through. So this is incredible. Sign Here by Claudia Lux is so fun. We're following a guy in hell who is meant to collect on deals people make against their souls. And we're following one family who throughout their bloodline have kind of continued making deals with the devil, and there's not really any devil. It's kind of, hell is sort of described as like an office where people who go to hell have to work. And so the person that they're making deals with is one of the main guys in here. His name is Peyote, and he's sort of their like case manager for the deals that they're making against themselves. And it's just a lot of fun. The writing in here is great also. The way that she can get so many senses into one line is such a talent. So I would definitely consider this an all-time favorite, just in like how fun it is, and then also just like how talented Claudia Lux is as a writer. And then if I were to rank all my 2022 books, I probably would put these two at the end. Like, I don't know if these are as good as the ones that I've talked about before for me, but Just Another Missing Person by Gillian McAllister. Gillian McAllister solidified herself as an auto-buy author for me. I will read anything she puts out. She just has such a grapple on like the theme of what mothers will do for their children, and like wraps that theme around really exciting thrillers. I don't know what to say about this book other than it's a detective story. She, the main character, I don't remember her name, is assigned to a case and is blackmailed into sort of having to lead the case astray so that it's not solved, and it's connected to something that her and her daughter did years prior. And like, that's all there is to say. It seems so simple, but Gillian McAllister is just such a master at a thriller and at a mystery. I also really loved Wrong Place, Wrong Time by her. I don't know if I would consider that an all-time favorite. I think this one is better. This one is fantastic, and I'm very excited for her new one, Famous Last Words, which is coming out in a few months. And then probably at the bottom of this list is Mad Honey by Jennifer Finney Boylan and Jodi Picoult. I never know how to say her last name. Picoult? This is about a girl who is found dead, and the boyfriend is immediately blamed. He gets put on trial. It goes through the whole court case. It goes through the whole investigation, and it follows him, and also has a similar theme of like what mothers will do for their children. And again, it seems so simple, but there are things that are brought up in this book that are not given away at all in the synopsis. So you like absolutely don't see them coming, and it puts in a really unexpected twist on the whole story and makes you view the story from a completely different angle than you expected to be viewing it from. And I really appreciate that was done in an unexpected way, because I think people will pick this up who probably wouldn't pick it up if they knew where the story goes. And they're probably the ones that need to pick it up because there's a lot to learn here. I gave this book a 4.5 when I first read it, just because it does some things at the end that I don't particularly love. But like when I think back on it, like when I think about what are my favorite books of 2023, like I think of this one before I think of other books I gave 5 stars that year. So whatever. Do with that what you want, but I really love this book. Okay, and then I'm gonna spare you guys from talking about 2024 again. I did a whole wrap up about 2024. If you need a reminder, if you haven't watched it, these were my favorite books from that year. If I were going to partition my top 10 books of 2024 into what I would consider all-time favorites and not, I think I would stop it at Shark Heart. Shark Heart I ranked number 6 in my top 10. Death Valley by Melissa Broder I put at number 7. But the best way I can say like what is an all-time favorite, it's totally just on vibe and feeling. When I think about all-time favorites, like my mind goes to Shark Heart in a way that it doesn't go to Death Valley. So Hereafter by Amy Lynn, Whale Fall by Danielle Kraus, Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll, The Pairing by Casey McQuiston, The Three Body Problem by Cixin Liu, and Shark Heart by Emily Habeck are new all-time favorites that I found in 2024. And if you want to see my full and complete thoughts on these, I will link my 2024 wrap-up down below. With that, my voice is kind of going. I can feel it. It's getting a little scratchy, so I'm going to sign out. But I really enjoyed getting to talk about books that I haven't really been able to talk to anyone about as much as I would like to. It's good for me to kind of take stock of things that I've read in the past and kind of recalibrate as we're starting this new year and think, okay, what are the things that I've loved? Where do I want my reading to go? And how am I going to sort of guide that? And so these books are going to be sort of a good roadmap for me for 2025. So thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.